Welcome to Creepy Whispers. I'm Jack Thompson, and here we'll explore stories that will send chills down your spine. Get ready to dive into the unknown, where each whisper hides a secret. First story, to this day, I can't explain what happened that night at the bar. It's been a few months, but I can't get it out of my head. I was working as usual on a busy Friday night. The place was packed, music playing, people talking loudly, laughter. You know, typical weekend buzz. I was behind the counter making drinks, going back and forth serving customers. Nothing out of the ordinary. That's when I noticed something strange in the corner of the room. There was an elderly couple sitting at a table near the wall. At first, I didn't think much of it, figured they were just more customers. But after a while, I realized they weren't moving. Like, at all. I watched them for a few minutes while serving other people. The couple was completely still, staring fixedly at the wall in front of them. They didn't even blink. I thought it was pretty weird. They hadn't ordered anything yet, so I decided to go over and see if everything was okay. As I approached their table, I started to feel something strange. It was like the air was getting heavier, and the noise from the bar seemed to be fading, becoming muffled. When I got close enough to see their faces, I felt a chill down my spine. Their eyes were completely black. I couldn't see the iris or anything, just that darkness in their wide-open eyes fixed on the wall. I froze for a moment, not knowing what to do. My heart was racing, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that maybe it was fatigue playing tricks on me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak. "Good evening. Can I help you with anything?" Nothing. No reaction. They kept staring at the wall as if I didn't exist. I tried again, a little louder. "Folks, is everything all right? Would you like to order something?" Complete silence. Not a muscle moved in their faces. I started to get really scared. Something was very wrong here. I decided to try one last time. I reached out to lightly touch the man's shoulder, but before I could make contact, they both turned their heads towards me in perfect sync. It was so sudden that I jumped back. The black eyes were now fixed on me, and I swear I felt like they were looking right through my soul. The woman's mouth opened slowly, much wider than should be possible. It looked like it was going to tear. A sound came out. I can't even describe it properly. It was like a hiss mixed with a muffled scream. Quiet, but at the same time deafening. I felt my knees weaken and my vision started to blur at the edges. At that moment, I just wanted to run away. But my body wouldn't obey. I stood there, shaking, while that horrible sound kept coming out of the woman's mouth. The man started to rise slowly, never taking his eyes off me. He was much taller than I had imagined. When he stood up completely, his head almost hit the ceiling. It didn't make any sense. How could he be so tall? That's when I realized that the rest of the bar had gone completely silent. I couldn't hear the music anymore, or the conversations, nothing. It was as if only me and that bizarre couple existed at that moment. I finally managed to move. I took a few steps back, almost tripping. I wanted to scream for help, but my voice wouldn't come out. The man started to lean towards me, stretching out an arm that seemed to grow longer and longer. His fingers were too long and thin, like dry branches. When I thought he was going to reach me, I closed my eyes tightly. I felt a gust of cold wind and heard a loud noise, as if something had exploded. When I opened my eyes again, they were gone. The table was empty, with no sign that anyone had been there. The noise in the bar suddenly came back, as if someone had turned the sound on full blast. I stood there, staring at the empty table, trying to process what had just happened. My head was spinning. Had I imagined it all? I looked around, searching for someone who might have seen something, but everyone seemed normal, continuing their conversations and drinking as if nothing had happened. My hands were still shaking when I went back to the counter. I grabbed a glass of water and drank it all at once. I needed to calm down. That's when one of the waiters came up to me and asked, "Are you okay? You look pale." I wanted to tell him what had happened, but the words wouldn't come out. How could I explain that? I spent the rest of the night on high alert. Every time someone approached the counter, I jumped. I kept watching every corner of the bar, expecting to see the couple again, but nothing. When my shift ended, I practically ran out of the bar. On the way home, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. I had the feeling I was being followed, even though I couldn't see anyone. I got home and locked all the doors and windows. I couldn't sleep all night. I kept replaying the scene in my head, trying to find some logical explanation, but there wasn't one. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I went back to work at the bar, but always on edge, expecting to see the couple again. I even asked my colleagues if they had seen any strange elderly couple that night, but no one remembered anything out of the ordinary. I started to doubt my own sanity. Was I going crazy? Or had it just been a very vivid dream? But deep down, I knew it had really happened. The feeling of fear, the knot in my stomach, those black eyes. It was all too vivid to be imagination. A week later, I was doing my normal shift when I noticed something on the wall near the table. I approached slowly, a bit wary of what I might find. It was a strange mark, as if someone had scratched the wall with something very sharp. It seemed to form a symbol I had never seen before. I felt a shiver run down my spine. No one else seemed to have noticed it. I tried to clean it, but the mark wouldn't come off. It was as if it had been engraved into the wall itself. At that moment, I was absolutely certain that I hadn't imagined anything. That strange couple had been there, and for some reason, only I had noticed. Since then, things have never been the same for me. I still work at the bar, but I always keep an eye on that table and the mark on the wall. Sometimes when the bar is very crowded and noisy, I think I hear that strange hiss again. I freeze on the spot, but when I look around, I see nothing out of the ordinary. I started researching on the internet about paranormal experiences, strange symbols, anything that could give me a clue about what happened. I found some similar stories, but nothing that fully explained what I saw. The worst thing is the feeling that it's not over. It's as if that encounter had opened a door to something I don't understand. Every now and then, I catch myself looking at the faces of elderly people on the street, afraid of seeing those black eyes again. I can't enter crowded places anymore without getting anxious. My friends have noticed the change in my behavior, but I don't know how to explain it to them. Who would believe me? Sometimes I doubt what happened myself. But then I look at that mark on the bar wall, and I know it was real. I don't know if I'll ever encounter that couple again, and to be honest, I don't know if I want to. I just know that night changed my life forever, and that there are things in this world that we simply can't explain. Second story, I'm still shaking just thinking about what happened to me last night. Seriously, it was an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. I was going through a rough patch, you know. I had just ended a 2.5-year relationship and felt like total crap. I decided to go out to clear my head to that familiar pool hall near my house. Everyone knows it. It's always been a chill place. I thought, I'll play some pool, have a beer, and forget about this funk. Little did I know that this night would turn into a nightmare I can't shake off. I arrived at the bar around 8. It was quiet with the usual vibe. A few tables occupied, the smell of beer in the air, that soft clicking of pool balls. I felt at home, you know. I ordered a beer and sat there, watching the tables, waiting for one to free up. That's when I noticed this guy staring at me from across the room. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, sometimes you get looks in a bar, right? But as time passed, I started to feel uncomfortable. The guy wouldn't take his eyes off me. It was bizarre. I tried to ignore it, focus on my beer, but that stare was giving me chills. After about 20 minutes, a table opened up and I went to play. I was trying to distract myself, trying not to think about the creepy guy. But then, out of nowhere, he appeared beside me. "Hey, beautiful. Are you alone?" he asked with a smile that gave me goosebumps. I replied that I was, but that I wanted to be left alone. The guy didn't get the hint. He kept insisting, saying he could keep me company, that I was too pretty to be alone. I was getting nervous, my heart racing. I tried to be polite but firm. "Look, thanks for the interest, but I really want to be alone." That's when things got tense. His smile vanished instantly. His eyes turned cold, You could see the anger. He got closer, invading my space. "You think you're too good, huh?" he growled softly. My blood ran cold. I looked around for help, but no one was paying attention. The guy continued, "You should be grateful for the attention I'm giving you." At that moment, I dropped the cue and ran to the bathroom. Locked inside, I was shaking. I stayed there for a good 10 minutes trying to calm down, praying for him to leave. When I finally gathered the courage to leave the bathroom, I took a cautious look around the bar. The guy had disappeared, thank God. But I was still super nervous, My hands were shaking when I grabbed my bag. I decided to leave right away, didn't even bother to pay the bill. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. On the way home, I walked quickly, looking over my shoulder the whole time. I had that horrible feeling of being watched. I got home and locked all the doors and windows. I was feeling paranoid, but after what happened, who wouldn't? It was when I was emptying my bag that I noticed something strange. A small, round object I had never seen before. My heart nearly stopped when I realized what it was. An AirTag. I froze. How did this get into my bag? Could it have been that guy at the bar? No, it couldn't be. Or could it? I started freaking out, thinking of all the possibilities. What if he was tracking me? What if he knew where I lived? I spent the whole night awake, looking out the window at every noise I heard. I couldn't stop thinking about the AirTag. Was I overreacting? Maybe it was just a coincidence, right? But what if it wasn't? I spent hours researching on the internet about how to disable these things. I ended up turning off the AirTag and throwing it in a drawer. But even then, I couldn't relax. Every hour, I remembered the face of that guy at the bar, the way he got aggressive. It was as if I could feel his gaze following me. The next day, I woke up with huge dark circles and a terrible headache. I was terrified of leaving the house, but I had to go to work. That's when I noticed something strange through the window. A car I had never seen before was parked across the street. Normally, I wouldn't care, but after everything that happened, I got super paranoid. I watched for a while and the car didn't move. I decided to wait a bit longer before leaving. Half an hour later, when I finally worked up the courage to leave, the car was gone. But on my way back from work, I swear I saw the same car driving slowly down my street. I started to feel that pit in my stomach again. Was I going crazy, or was someone really following me? In the days that followed, that feeling of being watched didn't go away. I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia, After all, I had just gotten out of a long relationship. I was vulnerable. These things mess with your head. But then things happened that made me more and more scared. Like, I started noticing that same suspicious car in various places. At the corner of my workplace, in the supermarket parking lot, even near the gym I used to go to. Always parked, as if waiting for someone. For me. I was going crazy with all this. I couldn't concentrate at work, barely slept at night. I started changing my routines, taking different routes to work, avoiding going out after dark. I even stopped going to the gym. But nothing helped, because that feeling of being followed wouldn't go away. I found myself looking over my shoulder all the time, startled by any noise. My friends started to notice something was wrong. They asked if I was okay, said I always seemed tense. But how could I explain? I didn't even understand what was happening myself. One night, I couldn't stand being at home anymore. I needed to talk to someone to vent. I called my best friend and asked her to come pick me up. While waiting on the porch, I noticed that suspicious car parked a little further down the street again. My heart raced. I was paralyzed, not knowing what to do. That's when I saw my friend's car arriving. I ran inside it, almost crying with relief. I told her everything about the guy at the bar, the AirTag, the car. She was super worried, said we should go to the police. But I hesitated. What if they thought I was overreacting? What if they couldn't do anything? On the way back home, my friend insisted on walking me to the door. When we arrived, we noticed that the living room light was on. I'm absolutely certain I had turned everything off when I left. I panicked. My friend called 911 right away while I was shaking like crazy outside. The police arrived in a few minutes, searched the house, but found no one. They said there were no signs of a break-in, that I must have forgotten to turn off the light. But I knew I hadn't. Something was very wrong, and I had no idea what to do about it. After that night, things got even stranger. The suspicious car disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. I didn't see any sign of it anymore, not near home, not at work. On one hand, I was relieved, but on the other, the uncertainty only increased. Was it over? Or had the stalker, whoever it was, found a more discreet way to follow me? I kept looking over my shoulder all the time, scared of every shadow, every strange noise. It's been a few weeks since then, and to this day, I can't explain what really happened. Sometimes I think maybe I imagined it all, that the stress of the breakup and loneliness made me see things that didn't exist. Other times, I'm sure it was real, that someone was actually stalking me. The AirTag is still stored in the drawer, a sinister reminder of those days of terror. I never went back to that pool hall, and it took me a long time to be able to leave the house without feeling afraid. This experience changed something in me, It made me realize how vulnerable we can be, how fragile our sense of security is. To this day, when I see a car parked for a long time on the street, or when someone looks at me for too long in a public place, I feel that pit in my stomach. I think I'll never fully understand what happened in those days, and maybe it's better that way. Third story, I'm sitting here, staring into space, trying to understand what the hell happened last night. My heart's still racing just thinking about it. You know that feeling when your life turns upside down in the blink of an eye. That's how I feel. I've been working as a bartender at this fancy place downtown for years. I've seen some strange stuff, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to what went down yesterday. It was a normal Friday night. The bar was packed as usual, music playing softly in the background, and I was doing my thing, mixing drinks, chatting with customers, the usual. Everything was perfectly calm until he showed up. This guy walked into the bar and man, I felt something weird right away. It was like the temperature dropped 10 degrees suddenly. He didn't look drunk or anything, but he had this look. I don't know. It felt like he was looking right through me, like X-ray vision. The guy sat at the bar and ordered a straight whiskey. As I served him, I noticed he wouldn't take his eyes off me. I tried to make small talk, like I do with everyone, but he just kept staring at me with this weird little smile. Then, out of nowhere, he drops this bomb. "Hey, Brian. Long time no see, huh? Still remember that night in 2005? My blood ran cold. How did this guy know my name? I'd never seen him in my life. And what was this crazy story about 2005? I tried to keep my cool, pretend everything was fine, but my hand was shaking so bad I almost dropped the glass I was cleaning. I swallowed hard and asked if we knew each other, trying to sound as natural as possible. The guy just gave a little chuckle that sent chills down my spine. "You know exactly what you did, Brian. And now it's time to settle the score," he said in a tone that made me freeze to the bone. I stood there, paralyzed, not knowing what to say. My mind was racing, trying to remember anything from 2005 that could explain all this, but nothing came to mind. It was like there was a black hole in that part of my memory. The rest of the night was a blur. I couldn't concentrate on anything, kept looking over my shoulder the whole time, expecting to see that guy again. But he had vanished, as if he'd never been there. When my shift ended, I ran out of the bar. I barely said goodbye to anyone, just wanted to get home and lock myself in. The whole way home, I felt like someone was following me, That feeling of eyes on your back. I got home, locked all the doors and windows, and sat in the dark living room, trying to understand what had happened. I couldn't stop thinking about that guy's words, the veiled threat. What had I done? Why couldn't I remember? I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, but at some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up startled, heart pounding. I looked at the clock. 3:17 a.m. Everything was quiet, but I felt something wasn't right. You know that feeling when you think someone's watching you? It was exactly that. I stayed still, barely breathing, trying to hear any noise. That's when I heard it, a creak coming from the hallway. My blood ran cold. Someone was inside my house. My mind went into panic mode. Was it the guy from the bar? How had he found me? What did he want? With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone to call the police. But before I could do anything, my bedroom door suddenly opened. I swear my heart almost stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was a dark figure. I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was him. The guy from the bar. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or scream. He stood there, staring at me for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Then, out of nowhere, he turned and ran. I heard his footsteps down the hallway, the front door slamming. Only then could I move. I ran to the kitchen, legs shaking, and that's when I saw it. One of my knives was missing. The intruder had left it behind, thrown on the living room floor. I stood there, staring at the knife on the floor, not knowing what to do. My mind was racing. Why had he brought a knife from my own kitchen? Was it some kind of message? I couldn't think straight. I picked up the knife with a towel, not wanting to leave my fingerprints on it, and put it in a plastic bag. I don't even know why I did that. Guess I've watched too much CSI. I spent the rest of the night pacing back and forth, checking every corner of the house, jumping at every little sound. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Who was that guy? What did he want with me? And why was 2005 so important? When the sun started to rise, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept at all. I was sweating cold, and my head was pounding. I decided I needed to get out of there, go somewhere crowded. I got on my bike and left without a destination, just wanting to get away from home. I ended up at a 24-hour cafe downtown. I sat in a corner, ordered a strong coffee, and watched people passing by on the street. Everything looked so normal out there, everyone living their lives, not knowing the nightmare I was living. That's when I started doubting myself. Had I imagined it all? Maybe work stress, I don't know. But then I remembered the knife. No, it had happened. It was real. And I needed to figure out what was going on before it was too late. I stayed at that cafe until noon, downing cup after cup of coffee, trying to remember anything from 2005 that could explain this madness. But it was like there was a hole in my memory. I remembered working at other bars, some relationships that didn't work out, but nothing that would justify some crazy guy stalking me after all this time. I decided I needed help. I called my friend Mike, who's a security guard. I told him everything, expecting him to think I was crazy. But Mike took it seriously. He told me to come to his place and said he'd figure out a way to investigate. I arrived at Mike's house feeling a bit safer. He remotely installed some cameras in my house and said he'd keep an eye on things. He also lent me some pepper spray, just in case. We spent the whole afternoon digging through my life in 2005. Old social media, emails. We even called some ex-coworkers. Nothing. Absolutely nothing that could explain what was happening. It was getting dark when Mike's phone beeped. It was an alert from the cameras in my house. Someone had entered. My heart raced when I saw the images. It was the same guy from the bar, walking around my living room like he was looking for something. Mike was already calling the police when the image froze. The guy had looked straight at the camera and smiled. A smile that chilled me to the bone. The police arrived at my house within minutes, but the guy was already gone. He'd left everything in disarray, as if he'd been searching for something specific. The cops asked a ton of questions, but I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something you don't even understand? I told them about the incident at the bar, the break-in the night before, but I left out the part about 2005. I don't know. I was afraid of sounding crazy or that they'd think I was hiding something. They promised to increase patrols in the area, but I could tell they weren't taking it too seriously. To them, it was just another case of home invasion. I went back to Mike's place. There was no way I could stay alone. We spent the whole night awake, reviewing the camera footage, trying to find any clues. That's when I noticed something strange. In one of the images, you could see the guy messing with some old books on the shelf. I was intrigued because I didn't even remember having those books. I asked Mike to zoom in, and I almost fell off my chair. It was a photo album from 2005, one I didn't even know still existed. My mind started spinning. What was in that album? Why was it so important? And that's when it hit me. A memory that had been buried for years started to surface. 2005, the bar where I used to work. One particular night. An accident. My God, how could I have forgotten? I felt my stomach sink as the memories started coming back. 2005. I was working at this rough bar on the outskirts of town. One night, there was a nasty fight. A guy ended up falling, hit his head, and didn't move. Everyone panicked. The bar owner, a tough guy, said we had to get rid of the body, that we couldn't call the police. I was terrified, didn't know what to do. I ended up helping carry the body out. We put it in someone's car. I never knew what happened after that. I blocked it all out of my mind, like it never happened. But now, the images were coming back full force, making me sick. I told Mike everything, and he was shocked. We sat in silence for a long time, trying to process it all. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. With shaking hands, I answered. It was him, the voice of the guy from the bar. Finally remembered, huh, Brian? He said, in a tone that gave me chills. That guy you disappeared? He was my brother. It took me years to find you, but now we're going to settle the score. Before I could say anything, he hung up. I sat there, paralyzed, the phone still in my hand. Mike was already calling the police again, but I knew this was far from over. The following days were a blur of police stations, testimonies, and sleepless nights. I told the police everything, from the 2005 incident to the recent threats. They took it seriously this time, put a patrol car on my street, and started investigating the old case. I felt like crap for keeping this secret for so long, but also relieved to finally get it off my chest. Mike stood by me the whole time, helping me deal with this mess. We beefed up the security at my house, installed more cameras, changed the locks. But even so, I couldn't relax. Every noise, every shadow made me jump. A week passed, and the guy didn't show up again. The police had no leads. It seemed like he had vanished into thin air. Slowly, I started getting back to my routine, although always looking over my shoulder. I went back to work at the bar, more out of stubbornness than anything else. It was on a Wednesday night, the bar almost empty, when everything changed again. I was cleaning some glasses when I heard the door open. I looked up, and there he was. The guy. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time stood still. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with those eyes full of pain and anger. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he turned and left. I ran to the door, looked out into the street, but he had already disappeared into the night. I stood there, frozen, my heart in my throat, knowing that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something I had no idea how it would end.